My name is Amy Lasek, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago in the Department of Psychiatry. So addiction is a chronically relapsing disorder that has a number of characteristics, and to clinically define addiction, it's based on the criteria in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychiatry. And so there are 11 criteria, and a few of those criteria are things like you, for instance, drink too much or take too much of a substance, you try to quit and you have trouble quitting, you develop problems in your life with your family and with your job because of the addiction, and you maybe exhibit signs of tolerance or to the drug or withdrawal to the drug. There are a number of changes in the brain. A few of them are involved in changes in the prefrontal cortex region of the brain. And so the prefrontal cortex region is a region of the brain that's involved in proper decision making. And what happens during the addiction process is that these areas of the brain basically become underactive or damaged, and then you no longer have the ability to make good decisions. And that leads to craving and relapse to the drug. There are also changes in what's called the limbic system, or the emotional centers of the brain, and those areas of the brain, basically they change such that the drug becomes the most important thing to a person. And because you don't have this control from the prefrontal cortex, you have this sort of overactivation of the limbic system.
My name is Dr. Christopher Holden. I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. There's a lot of different terminology for addiction, substance use disorder, and what have you. One of the issues is that addiction itself has always been, there's never been a clear scientific definition as to what addiction is. Moreover, addiction is a term that oftentimes carries stigma to it, so there's been different terms that have arisen and fallen over the years to explain it. For example, most recently, in the most recent edition of the manual that we use in psychiatry, they used dependence and abuse as terms to understand addictive disorders. All of that has been replaced now with the term substance use disorder. So for instance, if you have a disorder with alcohol, it would be alcohol use disorder, cocaine use disorder, and so forth. And we now look at a degree of severity. So someone could have a alcohol use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. Addiction treatment has evolved over the years and is still evolving. Up until in the 1950s was when it was first recognized by the American Medical Association as a disease, but the actual ramifications of that were a long time coming. What you had in like the 1970s, up until the 1970s, addiction was almost entirely viewed as a moral failing, and in the wake of the Vietnam War, for instance, people saw all these veterans that were going around suffering from addiction, and people, at least some people, started to wonder, well, maybe this isn't just a moral failing, maybe there's something else going on, in fact. So that led to the development of a lot of addiction treatment, the kind of classic 28-day rehab and what have you that emerged in the 80s had a lot to do with that. And then moving forward, right now we're kind of in a stage of transition where a lot of addiction treatment is, or the majority of addiction treatment is outside of healthcare. It doesn't occur in hospitals. It's not administered by doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals. And that seems to be transitioning with the passage of the Affordable Care Act and other sorts of things that have occurred in recent years. It seems to be more and more that addiction is moving under the realm of healthcare treatment.
I'm Dr. Celeste Napier. I'm a professor of pharmacology and psychiatry at Rush University Medical Center, and I'm also the director for the Center for Compulsive Behaviors and Addiction there. Well, we know that drug addiction influences particular brain regions and particular transmitters and chemical structures in the brain. And by knowing which transmitters are altered by these drugs, we will be able to intercede into those same transmitter systems, and we actually can reverse or substitute the effects that have occurred with these repeated drugs. So it's an absolutely logical, scientific way of treating a brain disease called addiction. Another common myth about drug addiction is if you're an intelligent person and you are a strong-willed person, then you'll be able to control the addiction. And science tells us that that's not the case, is that drug abuse and drug addiction occurs independent of whether or not you think you can control it, because eventually the drug controls you. I think a real important concept about someone who's addicted to drugs has to do with the fact that it's not a bad person, it's probably a good person that is abusing a bad drug. And that we need to understand that this is a brain disease and that these are good people and they're worth our time, our consideration, and they're worth providing excellent treatment so that they have the opportunity for recovery just like any other chronic relapsing disease.